Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the big window. The UES Iron Phoenix was a good ship, strong and fast like all human ships. Kim had been flying through space for 15 years now, and he knew his ship better than anyone. The crew called him Captain Kim, and they trusted him with their lives. The Iron Phoenix was patrolling the outer rim today. This was the edge of known space where few ships dared to go. Most alien species thought this area was too dangerous. They called it the Wild Zone because strange things happened here. But humans were different. Humans went where others feared to travel. On the bridge with Captain Kim was Communications Officer Lee Bo-ra. She was young, maybe 25 years, old, but she was the best at reading signals that Kim had ever seen. Bo-ra could find messages in static that other people thought was just noise. She sat at her station with big headphones on, listening to the empty space around them. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. 5 other crew members worked at their stations. They checked weapons, navigation, and life support systems. Everything was normal until Bo-ra suddenly sat up straight. "Captain, I am getting something strange," she said. Her voice was excited but also worried. "There is a signal coming from the Kalari system. It is very weak, but it sounds like a distress call." Kim walked over to Bo-ra's station. The Kalari were a peaceful alien race that traded goods across the galaxy. They never fought wars and they never bothered anyone. If they were sending distress signals, something was very wrong. "Can you make it clearer?" Kim asked. Bo-ra worked at her controls for several minutes. Her fingers moved fast over the buttons and switches. Slowly, a voice began to come through the static. It was speaking in the Kalari language, which sounded like singing mixed with clicking sounds. "I need the translation computer," Bo-ra said. She pressed more buttons and waited. The ship's computer was very good at languages. It could translate almost anything. After a few moments, words in human language began to appear on Bo-ra's screen. Kim read them out loud. "Help us, anyone who can hear this message. The Vorthan Empire has attacked our colonies. They are taking our people as slaves. Our defense ships are destroyed. Millions of innocent beings will die if no one comes to help us." Kim felt cold inside his chest. The Vorthan Empire was known across the galaxy as cruel and violent. They conquered weaker species and made them work as slaves. The Galactic Council had tried to stop them many times, but the Vorthan were too strong. Bo-ra kept working on the signal. More words appeared. "We have heard stories about the Deathworld Federation and their warriors from the planet called Earth. If these stories are true, if there really are beings who can fight the Vorthan, please help us. Our children are dying." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone had stopped working to listen. Kim knew that all his crew members were thinking the same thing. The Kalari had heard about humans. They knew that Earth was called a death world because it was so dangerous that only the strongest beings could survive there. They knew that humans were called Deathworlders because they came from this terrible place. Most aliens thought humans were crazy. Human ships flew into asteroid fields that would destroy other vessels. Human soldiers fought in places where the air was poison or there was no air at all. Human explorers went to planets where the gravity could crush normal beings into paste. Other species whispered about humans in fear and wonder, but the Kalari were asking for help. They believed the stories about human strength and human courage. They thought maybe the Deathworlders could save them from the Vorthan Empire. Kim looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. He had to make a decision that would change everything. If he ignored the signal, millions of innocent Kalari would die or become slaves. If he answered it, he would be starting something that could lead to war. "Bo-ra, send a message to Admiral Park Jin-woo at Fleet Command," Kim said. "Tell him we have received a distress call from the Kalari system. Tell him the Vorthan Empire is attacking them and they are asking humans for help." Bo-ra nodded and began working on the message. Kim knew that Admiral Park would understand what this meant. Park had been in the human military for 30 years. He had fought in the colony wars and the pirate conflicts. He was smart and tough, and he cared about doing the right thing. While Bo-ra sent the message, Kim thought about what would happen next. If Admiral Park decided to help the Kalari, It would be the first time humans had fought a major galactic power. Everyone in the galaxy would be watching. They would see what Deathworlders could really do in battle. The message to Admiral Park was sent through quantum communication, which meant it would reach him in just a few minutes. Kim waited and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, innocent beings were suffering and dying. Somewhere out there, evil beings were causing pain and fear because they thought they were stronger than everyone else. 20 minutes later, Bora received a reply from Admiral Park. The message was short. Message received and understood. Stay in position and keep monitoring Kalari transmissions. Help is coming. Do not engage enemy forces until fleet arrives. That is an order. Kim smiled for the first time since hearing the distress call. Admiral Park was going to help. The human fleet was coming. The Vorthan Empire had made a big mistake when they decided to attack the Kalari. They were about to learn what happened when someone hurt innocent people, and the Deathworlders found out about it. Bora continued listening to the Kalari signals. The messages were getting weaker, which meant the Kalari were running out of power, or their transmission stations were being destroyed. But they kept broadcasting, kept asking for help, kept hoping that someone would come to save them. Kim looked at his crew again. They were all ready for whatever came next. They had trained for this their whole lives. They were human beings from the death world called Earth, and they were about to show the galaxy what that really meant. The Iron Phoenix continued its patrol, but now everything was different. War was coming, and the humans were going to fight, for people they had never met, in a star system far from their home. They were going to risk their lives for the simple reason that it was the right thing to do. In the distance, stars continued to shine, but Kim knew that some of those stars were lighting up worlds where terrible things were happening. Soon, very soon, human ships would arrive at those worlds, and everything would change. Admiral Park Jinwoo sat in his office at Fleet Command and read Captain Kim's message for the third time. The words were simple, but they carried huge meaning. The Kalari were under attack and they were asking humans for help. This was the moment. Park had been preparing for his entire career. Park was 55 years old and had gray hair, but his body was still strong like all humans who lived on dangerous worlds. He had fought pirates, rebels, and monsters from the deep space, but he had never fought a major galactic empire. The Vorthon were not just criminals or raiders. They were a real military power with thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. Park pressed a button on his desk that connected him to all the human fleet commanders in the sector. Within seconds, faces appeared on his screen. These were the best officers humanity had produced, men and women who had proved themselves in combat against impossible odds. "Listen carefully," Park said to the faces on his screen. "We have received a distress call from the Kalari system. The Vorthan Empire is attacking them and enslaving their population. The Kalari have specifically asked for help from the Deathworld Federation. I am ordering immediate fleet mobilization." Commander Oh Sang-min was the first to respond. He was the leader of the elite Deathworld Marines, soldiers who were trained to fight in any environment. Oh was shorter than most humans, but his muscles were like steel cables. His men would follow him into the center of a star if he asked them to. "How many ships do we send?" Oh asked. "All of them," Park answered. "Every combat vessel we have in the sector, every Marine, every pilot, every gun. This is not a small operation. The entire galaxy will be watching to see what humans do when innocents call for help." Engineer Choi Da-yoon spoke next from her laboratory ship. She was thin and pale because she spent all her time working on new weapons and ship designs. But her inventions had saved human lives in dozens of battles. "Admiral, I have been working on Project Berserker," she said. "The new ramming systems are ready for combat testing. Our ships can now survive direct collision with enemy vessels. The crews will live through impacts that would destroy other species." Park nodded. Project Berserker was humanity's secret weapon. Other species fought battles at long range with careful planning and slow movements. Humans preferred to get close and hit hard. The new systems would let human ships ram enemy vessels and keep fighting. "How long do you need to install the systems?" Park asked. 12 hours for the main battle fleet," Choi replied. 18 hours for the assault carriers. Captain Ryu Minho appeared on another screen. He commanded the stealth ship Shadow Walker, a vessel so advanced that it could slip past any sensor system known to exist. Ryu was quiet and thoughtful, perfect for reconnaissance missions. Admiral, request permission to scout the Kalari system before the main fleet arrives, Ryu said. We need to know what we are facing. Granted, Park said immediately. Leave as soon as possible. Stay hidden and gather intelligence on Vorthon positions and numbers. Do not engage unless you have no choice. For the next hour, Park gave orders to his commanders. 200 warships would form the main battle fleet. 50,000 Marines would prepare for ground combat. Engineering teams would work around the clock to install the new weapon systems. Supply ships would carry enough ammunition and fuel for a long campaign. The news of the mobilization spread through the human colonies within hours. Volunteers lined up at recruitment centers. Shipyards worked at maximum speed to prepare vessels for combat. Families said goodbye to their loved ones, knowing that many would not return home. Meanwhile, Captain Ryu and his crew prepared the Shadow Walker for its dangerous mission. The ship was small and fast, designed to avoid detection rather than win battles. Ryu's team consisted of 12 specialists, each one trained in stealth operations. Remember, we are observers only, Ryu told his crew as they entered hyperspace. Our job is to see what the Vorthon are doing and report back. We do not fight unless they discover us, and we have no other choice. The Shadow Walker traveled through hyperspace toward the Kalari system. The journey would take 18 hours at maximum speed. During this time, Ryu studied everything known about Vorthon military tactics. The enemy preferred overwhelming force and brutal efficiency. They used fear as a weapon, showing no mercy to those who opposed them. Back at Fleet Command, Admiral Park watched as his massive fleet assembled. Ships arrived from a dozen human colonies, their crews eager for battle. The vessels were not as elegant as the ships built by other species, but they were incredibly tough. Human engineering focused on survivability rather than beauty. Commander O arrived at the fleet staging area with his Marines. The soldiers wore heavy armor that could protect them in vacuum, poison atmosphere, or crushing gravity. Their weapons were designed to kill anything that might threaten human colonies, from alien predators to enemy soldiers. Engineer Choi worked frantically to install her new systems in as many ships as possible. The Berserker ramming technology turned every human vessel into a potential missile. Other species would think humans had gone insane, but that was exactly what Park wanted them to think. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin arrived on the flagship to serve as the fleet's expert on alien biology and psychology. She was a small woman with sharp eyes, who had studied dozens of different species. She understood how alien minds worked, which would be valuable when dealing with both the Kalari and the Vorthon. Admiral, Dr. Yoon said when she reported to Park's office, I have been researching both species involved in this conflict. The Kalari are completely peaceful. They have no military tradition and no experience with warfare. The Vorthon are the opposite. They live for conquest and consider mercy a weakness. What does that tell us about the current situation? Park asked. The Kalari are probably suffering badly, Dr. Yoon replied. They will not know how to resist effectively. The Vorthon will be treating them with extreme cruelty to break their spirit quickly. Time is not on our side. Park felt anger growing in his chest. The thought of peaceful beings suffering at the hands of bullies made his human instincts demand action. But he forced himself to remain calm and think clearly. Anger was useful in battle, but planning required a cool mind. 18 hours after leaving Fleet Command, Captain Ryu and the Shadow Walker arrived at the edge of the Kalari system. What they saw through their sensors made the crew sick with rage. Vorthon ships surrounded every inhabited planet. Kalari vessels floated dead in space, their hulls broken and their crews killed. Cities on the planets below were burning. Count the enemy ships, Ryu ordered his sensor officer. I see 400 Vorthon vessels of various classes, came the reply. They have complete control of the system. No Kalari ships are offering resistance. Ryu sent this information back to Admiral Park using quantum communication. The message, was encrypted so the Vorthon could not intercept it. Along with the ship counts, Ryu included images of the destruction and evidence of Vorthon war crimes. When Park received the intelligence report, he called his senior officers together for a final briefing. The holographic display showed the Kalari system with all known enemy positions marked in red. The Vorthon have 400 ships, Park announced. We have 200. They outnumber us 2-1. Commander O smiled grimly. Good. If the odds were even, it would not be a fair fight. Park looked at his officers and saw the same determination in all their faces. These were humans, Deathworlders who had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They were not afraid of being outnumbered. They were eager to show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the innocent. We leave in 6 hours, Park said. When we arrive at the Kalari system, we will give the Vorthon one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will show them why humans are called Deathworlders. The fleet prepared for battle as Admiral Park sent one final message to Earth government, informing them that humanity was about to fight its first major galactic war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalari system, like a storm of metal and fire. 200 warships appeared in perfect formation, their weapons already charged, and their crews ready for battle. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Earth's Hammer, and watched the enemy fleet through the main display. The Vorthon ships were scattered throughout the system, confident in their superiority. They had been occupying the Kalari worlds for 3 days, taking slaves and destroying anything that might be used as resistance. The Vorthon commanders had grown lazy because no one had challenged them in years. General Krexthanor commanded the Vorthon fleet from his flagship, a huge vessel called the Starbreaker. He was typical of his species, tall and covered in gray scales with red eyes that showed no mercy. When his sensors detected the human fleet, he laughed with contempt. So the rumors are true, Krexthanor said to his officers. The Deathworlders have finally decided to play at war. Look at them, only 200 ships against our 400. They must be even more stupid than I thought. But Krexthanor's laughter stopped when he saw how the human ships moved. Instead of forming careful battle lines at long range like civilized species, the humans were charging straight at his fleet at maximum speed. No sane commander would order such a reckless attack. Admiral Park opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship in the system, both Vorthon and Kalari. This is Admiral Park Jinwoo of the Terran Defense Coalition. His voice echoed across space. Vorthon forces, you have attacked a peaceful species and committed acts of slavery and genocide. You have one chance to surrender immediately and release all prisoners. If you refuse, we will destroy you. Krexthanor snarled with anger. How dare these primitive Deathworlders threaten the mighty Vorthon Empire? He opened his own communication channel. I am General Krexthanor of the Vorthon Imperial Navy, he replied. You humans are fools to challenge us. We have 400 ships to your 200. Surrender now and we will kill you quickly instead of slowly. Park's response was simple. We gave you a chance. What happened next shocked every being in the system. The human fleet did not slow down or change course. They continued charging directly at the Vorthon ships, closing the distance at a speed that seemed impossible. Most space battles were fought at ranges of thousands of kilometers, but the humans wanted to fight at close range. Captain Han So-young commanded the assault carrier Thunderstrike, one of the largest ships in the human fleet. She watched the distance to the enemy shrink rapidly and felt excitement building in her chest. Han had been waiting her entire career for a battle like this. All squadrons, prepare for immediate launch, she ordered. Marines, get to your drop pods. We are going in fast and hard. The Thunderstrike carried 5,000 Deathworld Marines in specially designed pods that could penetrate enemy ship hulls. This was a tactic that no other species had ever attempted, because it required soldiers willing to be shot through space in tiny metal containers. Commander Oh Sang-min was in the first wave of drop pods. He had done this kind of assault dozens of times against pirates and rebels, but never against a major military force. The pod was cramped and uncomfortable, but Oh did not care. He was focused on the battle ahead. 30 seconds to launch, came the announcement. All Marines, check your equipment one final time. O looked at his weapon, a rifle designed to kill anything from any planet. His armor could keep him alive in vacuum, poison gas, or crushing pressure. His helmet display showed the target, a Vorthon cruiser that was trying to use captured Kalari civilians as human shields. 10 seconds, the voice announced. May the Earth protect you. The drop pods launched from the human carriers like bullets fired from enormous guns. Thousands of small metal containers streaked across space toward the Vorthon ships. The enemy tried to shoot them down, but there were too many pods moving too fast. On the surface of SciFiPrime, Ambassador Veltar watched the battle through a telescope from his hiding place in the ruins of the capital city. He was old even for a Kalari, his blue skin wrinkled and his tentacle-like arms thin with age. He had seen his people's ships destroyed and his world conquered. He had given up hope until the human fleet arrived. Are those really the Deathworlders? Asked a younger Kalari who was hiding with him. Yes, Veltar replied, watching the human ships charge into battle. The beings from the planet so dangerous that it made them into living weapons. The first human ships reached the Vorthon fleet and immediately began ramming tactics. Engineer Choi's new systems worked perfectly. Human vessels smashed into Vorthon ships and kept fighting, their crews protected by technology that other species thought was impossible. The Vorthon had never seen anything like this. Their careful battle formations collapsed as human ships appeared among them like sharks in a school of fish. Vorthon commanders tried to order retreats, but the humans were too close and too fast. Commander O's drop pod smashed through the hull of a Vorthon cruiser, and he rolled out shooting. The bus. Enemy soldiers inside the ship were not prepared for borders. They expected battles to be fought between ships, not inside them. O and his Marines moved through the corridors like a storm of violence. Secure the civilian prisoners, O ordered through his communication system. Kill any Vorthon who resists. The Marines found 300 Kalari civilians locked in the A ship's cargo holds. The prisoners were thin and scared, but they were alive. When they saw the human soldiers breaking down the doors of their cages, they could hardly believe it. You came, whispered one Kalari female, her voice full of wonder. The Deathworlders really came to save us. O looked at the civilians through his helmet visor. They were so different from humans, with their blue skin and tentacle arms. But their eyes showed the same fear and hope that he had seen in human refugees during the colony wars. We are getting you out of here, he told them in the Kalari language, which his helmet computer translated. Stay close to my Marines and do exactly what they tell you. While O's team rescued prisoners, the space battle continued to rage around them. Human ships were outnumbered 2-1, but they were winning because they fought like no other species in the galaxy. They rammed enemy vessels, boarded them, and fought hand-to-hand when their weapons ran out of ammunition. Captain Han watched from the bridge of the Thunderstrike as her Marines took control of ship after ship. The Vorthon were brave fighters, but they had never faced enemies who ignored wounds that would kill normal beings. Human soldiers kept fighting with broken bones, radiation poisoning, and injuries that would send other species to medical treatment. Dr. Lim Soo-jin was the chief medical officer aboard one of the human cruisers. She worked frantically to treat wounded Marines who were brought back from the boarding actions. What amazed her was not how badly they were hurt, but how they joked about their injuries while she worked on them. Doc, can you fix this arm? Asked a Marine who had been shot 3 times. I need it back so I can punch more Vorthon. Lim injected him with combat drugs that would let him return to battle in minutes. The chemicals would kill most alien species, but humans could handle them easily. She had seen Marines fight for hours with injuries that would hospitalize other beings. On his flagship, General Krexthanor watched his fleet being destroyed and felt fear for the first time in his long military career. The humans were not fighting like civilized beings. They were fighting like wild animals, but animals with advanced technology and perfect coordination. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 80% of the fleet is destroyed or captured, his aide replied. The humans are taking our ships instead of just destroying them. Their soldiers are fighting inside our vessels and we cannot stop them. Krexthanor realized that he had made a terrible mistake. The stories about Deathworlders were not exaggerations. These beings really were monsters in human form, creatures so tough and violent that they could defeat enemies twice their number. But the worst part was not their fighting ability. The worst part was that they were fighting to protect innocent beings they had never met. The humans were risking their lives for strangers just because it was the right thing to do. Ambassador Veltar watched the final phase of the battle from the planet's surface. Human ships now controlled the space around SciFiPrime. Vorthon. Vessels were fleeing in all directions, their proud fleet broken and scattered. The Deathworlders had won a complete victory in less than 6 hours. Send a message to the human fleet, Veltar told his aide. Tell them that the Kalari people are grateful beyond words. Tell them that we will never forget what they have done for us. As the human fleet began rescue operations to save the remaining Kalari prisoners, news of the battle spread across the galaxy at light speed. For the first time, everyone understood what it truly meant when someone said the word Deathworlder. The news of the Kalari battle reached the Vorthon homeworld of Nexus Prime 3 days later, traveling through the galaxy's communication networks like wildfire. Emperor Thekmodon sat on his throne of black metal and listened to the reports, with growing horror. His greatest general had been defeated, his fleet destroyed, and his reputation shattered by a species that most of the galaxy had barely heard of. Emperor Thekmodon was ancient, even by Vorthon standards. His gray scales, darkened with age, and his red eyes dim with centuries of conquest. He had ruled the Vorthon Empire for over 200 years, expanding their territory through fear and overwhelming force. Never in all that time had anyone dared to challenge his power so directly. Explain to me how 400 ships lost to Daoi. 200, he demanded from General Krexthanor, who had managed to escape the battle with only 50 vessels remaining from his once mighty fleet. Krexthanor stood before his emperor, with his head bowed in shame. His proud uniform was torn and stained with his own blood. The defeat had broken something inside him, something that could never be repaired. They fight like no other species we have encountered, Krexthanor said, his voice barely above a whisper. They do not fear death. They do not retreat when wounded. They ram our ships with their own vessels and survive impacts that should kill them. Their soldiers fight inside our ships where we cannot use our heavy weapons. The Emperor's claws scraped against his throne as his anger grew. You are telling me that these Deathworlders are better warriors than the mighty Vorthon? Impossible. But even as he spoke, more reports were arriving from across the Empire. Human ships had been spotted near 3 other Vorthon territories. Planets that had been conquered decades ago were sending messages asking if the Deathworlders were coming to free them too. The very name, human, was spreading fear through Vorthon space. Meanwhile, in the Kalari system, Lieutenant Nam Ji-hoon was about to become a legend. He was 23 years old, short even for a human, with kind eyes that hid a warrior's heart. Nam had been assigned to guard the main hospital on SciFiPrime, while medical teams treated injured civilians and rescued prisoners. The hospital was located in the ruined capital city, surrounded by buildings that had been bombed by Vorthon forces. Nam's squad consisted of only 12 Marines, but they were responsible for protecting over 800 Kalari patients and medical staff. On the 4th day after the space battle, Vorthon ground forces that had been hiding in the mountains launched a desperate counterattack. They wanted to recapture the hospital and use the patients as hostages to negotiate their escape from the planet. Nam watched through his rifle scope as 200 Vorthon soldiers approached the hospital from 3 directions. His Marines were spread thin around the building's perimeter, each one covering multiple approaches. The odds were impossible, but Nam had grown up on Earth where impossible odds were just another day at work. All squads, this is Lieutenant Nam, he said into his communication device. We have heavy enemy contact approaching from the north, east, and south. Remember, we have civilians behind us who cannot be moved. We hold this position no matter what. The battle began at dawn when Vorthon soldiers opened fire on the hospital with energy weapons that could punch through concrete walls. Nam moved from position to position, directing his Marines' fire and calling in artillery support from the human ships in orbit. But orbital bombardment was too dangerous with so many civilians in the area. Nam and his squad would have to hold the line with only their personal weapons and whatever supplies they could find in the hospital. Dr. Lim Soo-jin was inside the hospital treating both human and Kalari wounded when the attack began. She had been working for 72 hours straight, using combat stimulants to stay awake and alert. The drugs would have killed most alien species, but humans could function on them for days at a time. "Doctor, we need to evacuate the patients," said a Kalari nurse, her tentacle arms trembling with fear as explosions shook the building. "There is nowhere to take them," Lim replied, injecting a wounded Marine with painkillers. "The transport ships cannot land while we are under attack. We stay here and we keep working." Outside, Nam's defensive line was being pushed back slowly but steadily. The Vorthan had heavy weapons and more soldiers, but the humans had something else: the absolute refusal to give up. When Nam's rifle ran out of ammunition, he picked up a Vorthan weapon from a dead enemy. When that stopped working, he used his combat knife. The fighting continued for 6 hours. Nam's 12 Marines were reduced to 8, then 6, then 4. The lieutenant himself had been shot twice in the chest and once in the leg, but he kept moving, kept fighting, kept directing his shrinking force. Ambassador Veltar was among the patients in the hospital, recovering from injuries he had received during the initial Vorthan invasion. He watched through a window as Lieutenant Nam dragged a wounded Marine to safety while under heavy fire. The human soldier was bleeding from multiple wounds, but he moved with the same determination as when the battle began. "Why do they not retreat?" Veltar asked Dr. Lim as she changed his bandages. "The humans could fall back and call for reinforcement. Why do they stay here to die?" Lim looked out the window at Nam, who was now fighting with only 3 other Marines against over 100 Vorthan soldiers. "Because you are here," she said simply. "Because there are innocent people who need protection. That is what humans do." The battle reached its climax when the Vorthan broke through the main entrance of the hospital. Nam fell back to the central corridor, his remaining Marines forming a final defensive line in front of the patient wards. He had been fighting for 8 hours with wounds that would have killed most beings 3 times over. "This is Lieutenant Nam to any human forces in the area," he said into his communicator. "We are about to be overrun at the hospital. If anyone can hear this, the civilians here are good people who deserve to live. Tell them the Deathworlders tried, but help was already coming." Commander O had received reports of the battle and was leading a full company of Marines toward the hospital. They arrived just as the Vorthan soldiers reached the patient wards, and the sound of human battle cries echoed through the building. The rescue force found Nam still conscious, still giving orders, and still protecting the patients even though he was barely alive. His stand had lasted 9 hours against impossible odds, and not a single civilian had been harmed while he drew breath. News of Nam's heroic defense spread across the galaxy within hours. The young lieutenant became a symbol of human determination and sacrifice. Alien species who had never heard of humanity began to understand why they were called Deathworlders. On Nexus Prime, Emperor Thekmodan received detailed reports about the hospital battle. He read about humans who continued fighting with wounds that would kill Vorthan soldiers instantly. He learned about their casual use of drugs and stimulants that were deadly poisons to other species. He discovered that they treated radiation exposure and vacuum decompression as minor inconveniences. "What manner of beings are we fighting?" he asked his advisors. "How can they survive things that would destroy us?" General Krexthanor, still recovering from his own defeat, provided the answer that chilled every Vorthan in the room. "They come from a world so hostile that it turned them into living weapons," he said. "Every day on their planet is a battle for survival against gravity that would crush us, atmosphere that would poison us, weather that would freeze or burn us, and predators that would eat us. They are not just warriors, Emperor. They are evolution's answer to the question of how to survive in hell." The Emperor sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what this meant for his empire. The Vorthan had built their power on the fear they inspired in other species. But how do you frighten beings who come from a world more dangerous than anything you can imagine? "Send orders to all our frontier commanders," Thekmodan finally said. "Any ship that encounters humans is to avoid contact. We need time to study." these Deathworlders and learn how to fight them. But it was already too late for caution. Across the galaxy, word was spreading that someone had finally stood up to the Vorthan Empire and won. Oppressed species on 100 worlds were looking toward human space and whispering the word that would change everything. Hope. The humans had not just won a battle. They had proven that evil could be defeated, that bullies could be stopped, and that sometimes the strongest beings in the galaxy were the ones who fought not for conquest, but for the simple belief that good people deserved to be protected. Emperor Thekmodin stared at the reports from the Kalari system and realized that his empire's days of unchallenged dominance were over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were everything the stories said they would be. 3 months after the Battle of SciFiPrime, Admiral Park Jin-woo stood in the Great Council chamber on the neutral world of Centris Station. Around him sat representatives from 200 different species, all members of the Galactic Council. For the first time in history, a human was being offered a permanent seat among the galaxy's ruling powers. The chamber was enormous, built to accommodate beings of all sizes and shapes. Some delegates breathed oxygen like humans. Others required different atmospheres and sat in environmental suits. Some were tall and thin, others short and wide, but all of them watched Admiral Park with a mixture of respect and wariness. Chancellor Vexmori of the Altarian Republic called the session to order. She was an elegant being with silver skin and 4 arms, representing one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Her species had been peaceful traders and diplomats for thousands of years. We are gathered today to address the actions of the Terran Defense Coalition in the Kalari system, Chancellor Vexmori announced. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that have shocked the entire galaxy. The question before us is what role they should play in galactic affairs. Admiral Park wore his dress uniform, the dark blue fabric decorated with medals earned in battles across human space. He was calm and confident, but inside he knew that this moment would determine humanity's future among the stars. Everything his species had worked for over 2 centuries of space travel had led to this day. Ambassador Veltar of the Kalari spoke first. The old diplomat had recovered from his injuries and traveled to Centris Station specifically to support the humans. His blue skin had regained its healthy color and his tentacle arms moved with renewed strength. "The humans saved my people from slavery and death," Veltar said, his translated voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "When we called for help, every other species in the galaxy ignored us. Only the Deathworlders answered. They risked their lives for beings they had never met, asking for nothing in return." Representative Klaxon of the Hegemony Coalition spoke next. The Hegemony was a group of militaristic species who had often clashed with the Vorthan Empire. Klaxon was a tall insect-like being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights. "The humans used tactics that we consider barbaric," Klaxon said. "They rammed their ships into enemy vessels. They boarded Vorthan ships and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. This is not civilized warfare." Admiral Park stood to respond. He had expected this criticism from species who preferred long-range, careful battles that minimized casualties on both sides. "Representative Klaxon, you call our tactics barbaric, but they saved over 2 million innocent lives," Park said. "While the civilized galaxy watched the Kalari suffer, humans acted. We did what was necessary to stop genocide and slavery." The debate continued for hours. Some delegates praised humanity's courage and effectiveness. Others worried that the humans were too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with galactic power. All of them had seen the battle reports from SciFiPrime and knew that human military doctrine had changed the rules of war forever. During a break in the proceedings, Park received a message from Earth. President Ko Min-jung had sent word that the human colonies were united in their support for whatever decision he made. The message also contained news that made Park smile. Lieutenant Nam Ji-hoon had fully recovered from his wounds and been promoted to captain for his heroic defense of the hospital. When the council session resumed, Chancellor Vexmori presented the formal proposal. "The Galactic Council offers humanity a permanent seat with full voting rights," she announced. In return, the Terran Defense Coalition would be expected to provide military support for peacekeeping operations and the protection of member species. Park considered the offer carefully. A permanent seat would give humanity equal status with the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. It would also mean accepting responsibility for protecting hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. The Terran Defense Coalition accepts the council seat, Park said. But we have conditions. First, we will not be bound by rules that prevent us from helping innocent beings who are under attack. Second, we reserve the right to use whatever tactics are necessary to protect the defenseless. Third, any species that wishes to join a human-led defense alliance will be welcomed regardless of their council status. The conditions caused immediate debate among the delegates. Many species wanted human protection, but worried about giving them too much independence. Others argued that humanity's proven willingness to fight for others made them ideal peacekeepers. While the Galactic Council debated on Centris Station, the effects of human intervention were already spreading across the galaxy. On Vorthon-occupied worlds, resistance groups were forming and asking for Deathworlder support. Pirates and slavers were abandoning territories near human space, afraid of drawing attention from the species that had destroyed the Vorthon fleet. Captain Kim Tae-ho, whose ship had first received the Kalari distress call, was now Admiral Kim, and commanded humanity's new galactic peacekeeping fleet. His first assignment was to investigate reports of slave trading in the Outer Rim territories. The Iron Phoenix had been joined by 50 other human ships, all dedicated to protecting species that could not protect themselves. Engineer Choi Da-yoon had been promoted to Chief of Advanced Weapons Development and was working on even more devastating technologies. Her Project Berserker ramming systems were now standard equipment on all human warships. She was also developing new boarding pods that could penetrate any known hull material. Commander Oh Sang-min had become the leader of the Galactic Marine Corps, training soldiers from a dozen different species in human combat techniques. Most aliens could not match human physical capabilities, but they could learn human tactical thinking and determination. Dr. Yoon Hai-jin established the interspecies medical exchange, sharing human medical knowledge with alien doctors. Many species were amazed by humanity's ability to survive injuries and illnesses that would kill other beings. Human drugs and treatments were saving lives across the galaxy. The vote on humanity's council membership was close, but it passed by a margin of 60%. Admiral Park was sworn in as the first human counselor, accepting responsibility for his species' role as galactic protectors. In his acceptance speech, Park addressed the fears that many delegates still harbored about human nature. Some of you worry that humans are too violent, too aggressive to be trusted with power, he said. You are right to be concerned. We are violent, we are aggressive. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day, and we learned to fight back against impossible odds. Park paused and looked around the chamber at the hundreds of different beings who would now be his colleagues and responsibilities. But understand this. Our violence is directed only at those who harm the innocent. Our aggression is reserved for bullies and tyrants. We fight not because we enjoy it, but because someone must stand between evil and those who cannot protect themselves. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy, and its message resonated with billions of beings who had lived in fear of stronger species. For the first time in galactic history, the weak and defenseless had protectors who could match any aggressor. Emperor Thekmoden watched the broadcast from his throne room on Nexus Prime. The Vorthon Empire had lost 15% of its territory in the months since Kalari Prime, as conquered species rebelled and human ships arrived to support them. His once mighty empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The age of empire is ending, he said to General Krex Thanor, who stood beside the throne as a broken reminder of Vorthon defeat. These Deathworlders have changed everything. The ceremony on Centris Station concluded with the signing of the Terran Accords, establishing the legal framework for humanity's role in galactic affairs. Admiral Park signed the document with a pen made from metal, taken from the first human ship to leave Earth's solar system, symbolizing the long journey that had brought his species to this moment. As delegates began to leave the chamber, Ambassador Veltar approached Admiral Park with a final message from his people. The Kalari have voted unanimously to request membership in the Terran Protectorate, he said. We want to be the first species to formally ally with humanity. Park shook the old diplomat's hand, a human gesture that Veltar had learned to appreciate. Welcome to the family, Park said. Within a year, the Terran Protectorate had grown to include 37 species. The human fleet had expanded to over 1,000 ships, crewed by beings from dozens of worlds who had volunteered to serve alongside the Deathworlders. The galaxy was changing slowly but inevitably. The strong could no longer prey on the weak with impunity. Evil could not flourish in darkness because someone was always watching. Someone was always ready to fight. And somewhere in space, on ships bearing the insignia of Terra and her allies, human voices could be heard over the communication channels, carrying a message that had spread to every corner of known space. When innocents call for help, Deathworlders answer.